Good evening and welcome. You're watching The Big Fight, a show that is young at 23, the oldest running debate show on Indian News Television. I'm Sanket Upadhyay. The whole of last week, there is one documentary which is being spoken about a lot. It is a BBC documentary. The name of this documentary is India, the Modi Question. So what exactly does this documentary do? It chronicles the journey, the political journey of the then Chief Minister Narendra Modi to when he became the Prime Minister over the past 20 years and highlights many of the controversial events that unfolded while Narendra Modi was in power. So it is chronicling of that period in this documentary. Now the government moved in and essentially blocked the broadcast. It is a BBC documentary which was available only in the United Kingdom, but the government blocked any content related to this documentary being circulated on social media. And the moment that was done, it led to a counter reaction. So first it started with Jawaharlal Nehru University, where students tried a private screening of this docu-series. It was stopped by the JNU administration. And then all through the night there was protest and agitation. And then since then, from Jadavpur University to Presidency College to Hyderabad University to Chennai to Jamia University in Delhi, even the Kerala Congress stepping in and carrying out a screening, to the Ambedkar University, and now very recently on Friday, the Delhi University Arts Faculty, where Section 144 was imposed. Certain students were detained also for trying to screen this documentary. Now the latest order is that students can watch it in their private space on their phones or laptops, but not publicly. You know, when you see all of this happening, a word comes to mind or a phrase comes to mind. It is called the Streisand effect. According to dictionary.com, we'll put this on the screen also. It's part of the pop culture, this phenomenon. It's called Streisand effect. The definition is, the Streisand effect is a name for a phenomenon in which attempts to hide, censor or prevent access to something have the opposite result, the unintended consequence of drawing far more attention to that thing. So has this become a case of a Streisand effect? Has the BBC docu-series in India become the classic example to explain a Streisand effect? So on The Big Fight tonight, that's the question that we are asking. Screening of the blocked BBC documentary. Has censorship been counterproductive? Let's begin The Big Fight. Let me introduce our guest this evening. In the studio, Arjun Anand is an activist of ABVP from the JNU. Thank you very much, Arjun, for joining us. Amisha is an NSUI member from Jawaharlal Nehru University, the first university actually where this private screening began, where universities became, screening halls. And we also have Varke Parakal, SFI Delhi State Committee member. Thank you very much. These are our three guests in the studio. We also have Ratan Sharda, author of RSS from an organization to a movement. Ranbir Singh Pathania, spokesperson of the BJP. Parvez Alam, journalist and director of Cine Inc. London, also a former BBC employee. Zainab Sikandar, columnist and writer. Thank you very much. Let's begin with what we call the first punch. Arjun Anand, the rule is all of you get a minute time to make your opening comment. Your time begins now.
Most importantly, first question which we should look at is, if the screening was blocked by the university administration, if there were directions that it should not be screened, why were the left unity mob in JNU persistently trying to vitiate the environment of the university? Why were they trying to bring infamy to the campus, which they have been doing since its inception? So I don't think the main question is what happened or how it happened. The main question is, why were they even trying to screen a documentary which is not allowed? And it is not even a question of democracy. They heckled a Janam TV reporter outside the JNU gate. So if they respected freedom of expression, they would have let the non-left also thrive there. But it is not about freedom of expression at all. They are just doing propaganda. They just want to further their agenda. They just want to facilitate a colonial, an anti-India broadcasting channel to propagate their anti-India propaganda.
Okay.
That's what it is about.
Okay, Amisha, your views.
I think, sir, what's more important here is we need to distinguish between a documentary and a fiction movie. A documentary is a non-fiction movie where we are talking about the interpretation of the factual material. So even if this documentary is made, so there's this ground reality existing. There's not a new narrative which has come out from this documentary, So why are we trying to, this is a research method. So when we're talking about educational institutions screening a documentary, so I don't see any other point where questioning of injustice, or when we talk about the researches, we try to take up a problem in India only or internationally. So that is what is research meant for. So in educational institutions, when we are trying to show a documentary, I don't see it as any objectionable or JNU is being targeted as anti-national. It was by the student union. So it was the students union, JNUSU, so that is where we have elected members from all the parties, not a party. So here we have elected members from various parties. So if this was being, and there was a reply given by the students union to the administration that on what basis you took out the circular.
Sure. Varki.
See, I absolutely disagree with my friend in the ABVP. This is absolutely a question of the right to freedom of speech. He's asking a very simple question, which is, I understand, if the admin has banned it or has asked the students not to screen it in campus, why are you screening it? So is this the way a democracy is going forward now? The central government, the administration of universities, which is controlled by that central government, will ask certain things to not be told or talked about in campuses, and students should just adhere. This is absolutely a question of freedom of speech. As a matter of fact, just a few days before this, the Kashmir files were screened by their organization on campus. There was no power cuts, there was no heckling, no stone pelting, nothing. It happened peacefully. All the students went back. So when there is quote unquote propaganda in their favor, it becomes a matter of freedom of speech. When it becomes, when it is an issue against them, suddenly we are a stickler for rules now.
Okay. Ratan Sharda, your opening comments.
Sanket, first of all, I have from many days said that this blocking was not required. It was a mistake on part of the people who ever decided this particular road of path. But coming to the main issue is that there was a movie called Dulhan Wahi Jo Piya Man Bhai. I put it as Satya Wahi Jo Left Ko Bhai. So after Supreme Court judgment, after 8 years of this investigation under the very Congress government which talks about Satya Bahar Aayega, Mr. Modi was given clean chit. Worst was written in Indian media. BBC couldn't have done worse than what already is written by various journalists whom they have used. The very journalists who spew poison and who knew that there was all wrong, Supreme Court trashed their entire argument and witnesses, and they are again saying Satya Bahar Aayega. It is like to keep the kettle boiling, as the Supreme Court said in its judgment. So here the people talking of freedom of expression. NSY lady talked about freedom of expression. Does she know Congress has to its credit the maximum number of books and films banned? And does SFI remember that hands of a teacher were cut because the teacher asked some question in Kerala? People are routinely killed who don't agree with their viewpoint. So what exactly is freedom of expression?
Okay.
It is a freedom for them to say whatever they want to say,
Sure.
not what the truth is. So this is highly partial, highly biased view of what is truth and what is not truth. For the time being, I'll stick to that. I'll come to BBC role itself later if you give me time.
Yes. I'll give you time. You've run out of your 1 minute time for your opening comments, but I'm going to come back to you and then you can say all that you want. Full freedom here to express your views, I am assuming, against the British Broadcasting Corporation. Ranveer Singh Pathania, your views.
Sanket, you were just referring to stress and effect. I was going through an editorial published in the edit page of The Hindu also. They have also flagged the same concept. But let's not fall into that plethora of arguments and counter-arguments regarding stress and effect. My specific submission that right to freedom of speech and expression is a fundamental right, one part. Secondly, right to speech of freedom of expression is not at all an absolute and an untrammeled right. This is subject to a certain rule of certain set of limitations. I'll just read a latest law, a latest judgment of the Supreme Court in which I had also an opportunity to participate. This is Namit Sharma versus Union Affidavit. I will just take 2 sentences for the perusal of my learned friends which specifically says that one-sided information, disinformation, misinformation and non-information, they all equally create an uninformed citizenry which makes democracy a farce. When the medium of information is monopolized, there is no equality between Kashmir files and we could say a false, a fake, a provoked, a documentary prepared by BBC on the matter issue. You see, but the Narendra Modi ji is the Pradhan Mantri, is the Prime Minister of India. Now, anybody has a right to question him, to criticize him. But if he indulges in, as Supreme Court says, misinformation, disinformation, less information, or right or left information, just constructing a story almost 2 decades after the incident has happened. Once the India is in a very momentous stage, the 75 years.
Okay,
India
now two things here.
India.
Yes, Mr. Pathania, you've run out of your opening.
Yes,
you've run out of your time for the
please.
opening comments. I'm going to come back to you. You can continue to say what you're saying. Zainab Sikandar.
Please.
The opening lines that you made in the show is actually the sum total of what has happened with the Modi documentary done by BBC. It is the Streisand effect. What has actually happened is the government has been ill-advised to ban this documentary, which if otherwise they wouldn't have touched, they wouldn't have spoken about, it would have maximum made an effect on what BJP calls the Lutyens Delhi or the Khan Market gang or the Tukde Tukde gang. Besides those people, I don't think anybody would have even spoken about this BBC documentary, because you have to understand this documentary was only aired in the UK. It had nothing to do with India. Now that the government has banned it, there are multiple torrents that have come out of this particular documentary, and it is readily available on the internet for anyone in India to view. If they wouldn't have banned it, people wouldn't have even spoken about it. And one example of this is, BBC had also taken out a video when Article 370 was abrogated of stone pelting in Sora. At that time, not many people really shared that video, and even if it was viewed, the majority of India was in favor of what the government did. There was no banning or anything of that video of BBC. So I think the government should have taken the same route. They shouldn't have panicked as they have, and they shouldn't have tried to contain the little snippets that came out. Instead, what they ended up doing is that they opened Pandora's box, and now the whole video is for everyone to watch.
Yeah. Mr. Parvez Alam.
Right. Thank you very much, Sanket. And first of all, I would like to welcome what Ratan Sharda ji has said. I think half of your debate is almost done here in a way, that someone of his stature in the establishment is saying that the decision was not, the ideal one, is not the kind of a desired kind of a result or outcome of any debate on the freedom of speech and discussion. Anyway, so that's one part. Second thing is that, look, whenever we go to the international arena and we try to build up a good relationship with the Western countries and with some of the most developed countries and with some of the most democratic countries, what we sell, I just remember a dialogue from Diwar, where Amitabh Bachchan says, I've got everything. मेरे पास धन है, दौलत है, गाड़ी है, कार है, बंगला है, तुम्हारे पास क्या है? And Shashi Kapoor says, मेरे पास माँ है. So this is what India has been saying during the last 30-40 years. Whenever they counter India's strength against China or any other despotic regime, India would always say, we have got the world's largest democracy. And that's a very sensible thing to say. But the fact is, it's time to walk the talk. Puri dunya dekh rahi hai. The whole world is watching us. And if we can, if we just start banning documentaries made by one of the most reputed organizations in the world, it doesn't happen in the most civilized countries. It doesn't happen in the most democratic countries. So I think it's time that we really walk the talk and we say that freedom of speech is really important in India. Okay. And everyone is going to defend it.
Okay, Mr. Alam, I'm going to continue with you and ask you a question, and then we'll throw this open for the big fight, as they say. My question to you is, see, two things. Number one, what the government did on trying to block this documentary and the Streisand effect coming into force. And number two is the BBC's own alleged bias, which is being referred to in the country. You've worked with this organization. Would you like to tell us about the history of BBC stories, news stories, particularly, and its relationship with those in power, those outside power, in the UK, outside of the UK, in India, outside of India?
Sure.
How would you respond?
Thank you. I think it's a great opportunity for me. Actually, I joined the BBC in 1988, and just remember this thing. I used to work for All India Radio as a program executive. I was selected by the UPSC. So for almost 5 years, I worked for the state broadcaster, All India Radio. Now there is a difference. All India Radio is a state broadcaster. Doordarshan is a state broadcaster. BBC is not a state broadcaster. Lots of people confuse it with being a state broadcaster. It's a public broadcaster. It's not even a private broadcaster. So, there's some difference between these two. Second thing is that, look, BBC has always been criticized for its sometimes anti-establishment. And let's not talk about India, Pakistan, etc. Let's talk about this country. I'm here based in London for the last more than 30 years, and there have been various debates when the BBC has been criticized by the government. And now let me give you 2-3 specific examples. Like Winston Churchill, who is seen as a symbol of imperialism, was banned by the BBC for almost 11 years. And Winston Churchill accepted it, and Winston Churchill was so unhappy that in 1954, he actually wanted to punish the BBC, and he said that private television should also be introduced, and ITV was launched in 1954. This was Winston Churchill, who was so unhappy with the BBC that BBC has barred him from certain broadcasts. So this is one part. Second thing is that whether it has been the Director General of the BBC, for example, George Whistle in 2012, that he was interviewed by John Humphreys, a top BBC broadcaster, and investigated him and gave him such a hard time that after a couple of days, there was a scandal going on here in this country. The BBC Director General was made to resign. And this happened because there was robust journalism conducted here at the BBC. Now, second thing is recently, just this week, by the way, the chairman of the BBC, Richard Sharp, who was a very good friend of the former Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson. Now, he is being investigated for having a conflict of interest because he had negotiated or facilitated a kind of a loan to Mr. Johnson when he was a Prime Minister. Now, BBC has been conducting all these debates against its own chairman on the airwaves officially here in this country. He's being given a hard time by the BBC reporters. So this is what you have to understand from the BBC's point of view, that BBC would lose its sheen and shine if it compromises with its credibility.
Okay. Ratan Sharda, how would you respond? Here is a former BBC employee who's trying to give us a perspective of how the BBC works and why they do what they do. How would you respond?
Well, Sanket, I appreciate Mr. Parvez loyal to his former organization because he has been very loyal to the organization. Coming to BBC's own credibility, I don't know what they want to do within the country. I'm not bothered. What I'm bothered about is what BBC has done to India whenever there is an occasion they have got. You remember Jack Straw, he's the main straw guy for this particular documentary. He was one who floated the idea of WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. BBC very faithfully carried on the report, and millions of people died in Iraq. Middle East went into war because of this fake idea of WMD, which was only for fuel that Iraq carried. Now, way back in '65 during Pakistan war, BBC have all kind of negative reports, and MC Chagla had to report in Lok Sabha in '67 about BBC's negative propaganda against India. In 1970, not one, not three documentaries were made on which Indira Gandhi raised objection. Finally, in '72, she shut the office of BBC in India for 6 months. How many people know this? During Goa liberation, Mr. Dom Morris was called in the BBC office, and he burnt his passport saying that I am no more an Indian citizen. This was displayed all across the world. In 1981, Khurshid Alam of of Congress, as a minister, talked about BBC's anti-India propaganda. 81 under Indira Gandhi, again similar complaints. In 84, during the worst times of Khalistan, they aired the interviews of Dr. Jagjit Chauhan again and again and gave wide platform to spread venom against India. 88, Rajiv Gandhi was very much unhappy with what BBC did to it. 1992, at the same problem.
Mr. Ratan
Independence
Sharda,
of the journalism that does not mean
Mr. Ratan
to put down
Sharda,
the country.
Mr. Ratan
against,
Sharda,
continues to put down the country.
Mr. Ratan Sharda, this point that you're making,
Yes, please.
it makes me,
And lastly,
it
BBC
makes me
is
wonder.
not a,
One moment,
see,
Mr. Ratan Sharda, it makes
BBC
me
runs
wonder.
off taxpayers' money.
Yeah, Mr.
Yeah.
Ratan Sharda, it makes me wonder, this list that you have given, where you mentioned Congress is also unhappy, BJP is also unhappy, all regimes are unhappy. So, what must I conclude from this?
I did not say unhappy every time. I talked about typical critical moments in history of India.
Yeah, which
Khalistan
includes
movement,
which
If you
includes
don't
Congress
mind,
and
let me
BJP,
conclude it,
Doesn't
Mr.
do it
Ratan
for
Sharda.
which then basically means anyone who's in power has a problem.
Pakistan caused continuously.
Because you know the Prime
It is not
Minister
power, it is
himself,
question
there
of
are clips
wartime.
of
No,
the
no,
Prime
no.
Minister
It's
where
even
he's
wartime.
seen commenting on the credibility
Sanketji,
of this very organization.
I am talking of 19 Goa
we-
liberation, I am talking of 1965 war, I am talking of 1971 war, I am talking of the liberalization process and nuclear program of the PV Narasimha Rao government. Whenever India has sought to be strong and fought against enemies, BBS stood to the enemy. That is my view. I am not talking of daily news, I am not talking of daily analysis, I am talking of critical moment in history.
Okay, so
we
you're
talk
not
of
talking
audience,
about
I am sorry to
the
say, that's
incumbents or the opposition, you're talking about BBC's position vis-a-vis
approach.
India.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come to you, Mr. Parvez Alam. I'll come to you because I know that you have a view on this. Zainab Sikandar, you see 2 points here. Number one, the government's action, which you mentioned in your opening comment. And number two is this point of BBC's bias, which is questioned by a lot of people. And as Mr. Ratan Sharda says that this is not bias against BJP, this is anti-India bias over the years. That's his submission. Yeah.
There are two sides to this coin. Of course, anybody who's pro-right-wing will say that BBC has an anti-India bias because that is an easier way to convince the larger public that BBC is trying to attack the sovereignty and integrity of India. But fact of the matter is, it's very well known, BBC is very clearly anti-Modi, anti-BJP in the kind of reporting that they do because they are anti-establishment, as Parvez ji rightly pointed out. They are pretty much anti-establishment even when it comes to their reportage in the UK. And, the bottom line is, I must say that BBC has struck a marketing blitzkrieg because they have managed that every publication is also mentioning them and talking about how good their journalism is or what are the standards of their journalism. BBC has done excellent reporting in the past. We can't take that away from them. And please remember, they are not discussing India in this documentary. They're discussing a politician. And that politician right now is the Prime Minister of India. And at that time was the CM of Gujarat. So I don't think we should, fall for these things because Indira Gandhi had done the same thing. She used to say India is Indira and Indira is India. And that was not the case. She was just the Prime Minister of India at that time. And many people liked her and many people hated her and many people were indifferent towards her. Similarly, from Prime Minister Modi, many people love him. He has his andhbhakt and many people are opposed to him. So BBC conducting a documentary on him, on one of the biggest blot on his career, which is the 2002 Gujarat riots, is only fair enough. Of course, the timing is suspect.
But Zainab, you see, if you look at this as just an attempt in a documentary to chronicle the events of the past, including the investigation process which cleared the Prime Minister. The investigation process has cleared him.
Yes.
He's been absolved of all these charges, right? That too has been mentioned in this documentary, I am being clear.
Absolutely. And there is also Swapan Das Gupta, who's very much a part of this documentary and who is speaking a pro-Modi line.
Inside,
So
he's said to be in the part of the, a part of this documentary.
Absolutely,
Mr. Pathania,
he is.
Mr. Pathania, your government is opposing, members of the Bharatiya Janata Party are opposing, and a member of your own party, Mr. Das Gupta, is said to have been a part of this very documentary, putting forth your views. Now my point is, are you contesting or challenging the fact that this documentary was made, or you're challenging the facts in this documentary? What are you challenging? Because the documentary is believed to have just put each and every historical event together. It's like putting pieces in a jigsaw.
And very pertinent and particular to mention it, just after 2 decades after. 2 decades, how come the BBC come out of a self-imposed cocoon and then publish a documentary that even on concocted facts and figures. Somebody was saying that BBC is anti-India. I am saying BBC is anti-truth. BBC has been publishing a series of false and fake informations on its esteemed Twitter handles as well as its special broadcasts. I have myself seen in Kashmir, BBC had to, after revocation of Article 370, BBC published a story that a group of youth, they were tortured, they were lathi charged while they were pelting stones. Ultimately, it came out and BBC had to say sorry that nothing of the kind happened. What to say of the credibility of BBC? I'll just reading a news of a BBC what Surya Kamar's wife does before how when he does a good bad thing. Why do people wear dirty underwear? This is the level of reporting of BBC. With due respect to the learned panelist who had shown his fullest loyalty to the BBC, what is this level? How? My point is, if you are, though you may be anti-establishment, that's one part. But if you are not able to put out the truth, you go with untruths, you go with misleadings, you go with disinformation, you go with misinformation. This is the highest casualty you are going to do. And the government, in the collective wisdom, have issued an order. What needs to respect it?
Achha, Mr. Pathania, tell me something. You see, even Mr. Sharda is saying that this whole thing of blocking, censoring, cancelling was ill-advised. Now let's talk about, we've spoken enough about the documentary. I'll get the youngsters here also. On the quality of the documentary, on whether BBC has a bias or not, you all can also weigh in. But the point is, one moment, let me ask the question. Mr. Pathania, do you feel...
discuss the commentary.
Sorry?
Yes, sir. My respectful submission is that what positive points are there and discuss the pros and cons of the commentary. We should not discuss it on your stream channel because it is formally banned by the government. The step of the government, we can
by the way,
the role of the BP.
By the way, there is no official order from the government banning this.
With due respect.
Banning this documentary. I do not think the government has banned the documentary because technically this documentary has never been released in India. It is only for audience in the UK. Now torrent downloads are happening, that's another thing. But that's a result of your blocking the various YouTube handles.
I understand it. I understand.
So do you feel that step that was taken by the government was wrong? You have only made the documentary more popular.
Sir, that's true. That is one aspect of the matter. Stress and effect.
You also agree?
That is one part. That is the stress and effect. But you have said it might have its own pros and its own cons. I stick to the opinion that once the government has blocked access to the said documentary, it amounts to block. That's not a matter of debate. We should not discuss what is contained therein, how it unmasks. Though I might have the access to various ingredients, to various facts, to various figures projected in the documentary. We should not discuss it on this platform. But the point remains that this is a conspiracy to defame India.
No, one more. Why, Mr. Pathania? Mr. Pathania, I think you're using BJP and the Prime Minister, who were primarily featured in this documentary, and India, these two words interchangeably.
Sir, not at all. My respectful submission, sir. We are not scared
of... The documentary is...
not scared of...
Why do you think... The documentary very clearly says that this is the Modi question.
Allow me to...
It's on Modi, not
India.
India.
Allow me to make a point. Sir, please allow me to make a point. My point is that we are not scared of anything which amounts to go against the Bharatiya Janata Party or which amounts to go against...
So tell me something now, what will you do? If you felt that this was anti-India and must be blocked, the exact opposite has happened. Now everybody is watching.
That's true, sir. I am palpably against, this is my personal opinion too, that against spread of misinformation, against the spread of disinformation, against the spread of false facts, false figures, false euphemism, and trying to create.
Okay, let's come back to the studio and get a view from the youngsters. Arjun Anand first, and then Varki.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Arjun Anand first. First of all, on the documentary itself. Now you've heard many of the commentators, they're saying that, again, opinion is divided. One set of people feel that this is an anti-India bias. The other set feels that this is journalism. They've done that in their own country as well. How would you respond?
So first of all, I want to make it clear that The students' union in JNU is not elected for 5 years. It is not a Panchvarshiya Yojana. It is only elected for 1 year. And elections happened in 2019. So the current left unity mob in JNU is not the representative of the will of the students of JNU. They consider they are self-proclaimed vanguard of the students, but they are
Okay,
not.
we are talking about the documentary.
But I want to correct her factually.
Okay.
Second thing, as far as the documentary goes, so BBC has a bias, and I don't think that the blocking of the movie could have been, I'm not getting into that, but the blocking, the screening of the movie was organized just to create ruckus in the campus. The same leftist mob that organized the screening went on after the movie to hunt the ABVP cadres. Two of our Karyakartas, Gauravji and Vikasji, were heckled, were dragged in front of media cameras. One of them, Gauravji, is also a heart patient. He could have got serious. There is literally videographic proof of leftist mobs consisting of students from Jamia and DU also, mind you, outsiders of JNU, who are hunting them and heckling them in front of media cameras to you know, they are kind of saying them to mano tumne patthar mare hain, and they are saying that let us speak, and they are not letting them speak. So this kind of lampunry, these leftist lumpans have been committing in JNU campus from a long time.
Okay, sure, Amisha.
So I would like to start with that JNU
This point on bias.
Yeah,
in the documentary.
Yeah, I would again like to reiterate that this documentary has a method. So we already have a procedure for it. We have documentary reviews, right? So we can obviously look at that. The second thing, when we're questioning of central government, I don't see it as anti-national. Questioning of injustice, whether it is through a documentary, it is through a PhD, or it's through some journalism, I don't see. If inequalities exist in India, if injustices exist in India, so that is where we need to question them. That is what makes a democracy strong. And even criticizing of the public policies or seeing them critically is not anti-national, right? So when when the screening happens, JNU is a space where we have screenings and discussions in public spaces, right? That happens. I think everybody here would agree. And that is, we have our own democratic spaces. Can't I expect ABVP to come and debate and have a discussion with us? Why are we continuously seeing that they're threatening us? They're pelting stones. So as NSI representative, I'm against the violence which happened. I'm against the administration's response as the power cut. And considering on the whole...
No, by the way, what JNU started is now become like a pan-India
so
campus
why can't
phenomenon.
BJP today debate and have a discussion with JNU students? Why have they chosen this one policy of defamation to JNU? Because they know they cannot debate and discuss with JNU. Same is the ABVP doing in all the campuses across India, where we are having continuous incidents where ABVP is having violence, they're doing violence, they are threatening students, and I'm here seriously for the rights of the students. I think BJP and ABVP needs to understand what is a student, what is the education system, and they really need to, they are cutting off funds, fee hikes are happening, library funds are being cut. So I think they're not pro-students, and students, labeling students who are future of India as anti-nationals, the top university of India, the government data only says that JNU is the top university of India.
Yeah.
So I see it as an attack on public education system.
Okay, Varke, your views.
So my view is that let's not constrain the topic to JNU or to the credibility of the BJP, of the BBC. Right, sorry. We have to talk about two things in my opinion. One is the content of the documentary itself. We can discuss that without discussing the last 100-year history of the BBC. Right, the direct content that is being brought to us. And the second thing is what needs to be talked about. The BJP representative here said that they are not scared. Then it's a very simple question. If there is no fear from the government side, then why are the links being taken down? Why were the IT rules applied for this particular document? There is clearly a fear. If there is nothing to fear, if Prime Minister Narendra Modi...
No, but then if there is a fear, then the exact opposite has happened. No, now more people have watched the documentary.
That is a consequence I feel that they did not expect to happen. They expected, I guess, an Orwellian style campaign of shutting down links on the internet, which I guess, as someone said here, was an ill-advised move to the government. But regardless, the point is that if their conscience is clear, if Prime Minister Narendra Modi, if the leadership of the BJP in India can go to sleep every night without the sting of conscience of their past, then there needs to be no fear, right? There needs to be no fear, even if hypothetically it's outright propaganda. If the BBC is coming out with lies, why would the government be afraid? This is a government that got one of the largest mandates in Indian electoral history. What are they afraid of?
Mr. Pathania, you know, ever since the broadcast of this documentary in the UK, and then of course a lot of torrent downloads in India, one very common conspiracy theory that is being floated is that perhaps it in a way helps the BJP also. When there will be a discussion, a polarizing discussion around these issues, settled issues as you say, you will have a very polarized opinion along expected lines, which is exactly what is happening. Your constituency has come closer to you, those who are against you have moved closer to wherever they were.
Sanket, the gains and loss for a political party, this is a smaller issue. The bigger issue is the constitution and the concept.
Okay, I seem to have lost that link with Mr. Pathania, but Mr. Ratan Sharda, let me ask you this question. Don't you think that the answer to a documentary, if the feeling is that it is a bad documentary, incorrect documentary, a documentary with a bias, is another documentary, another film for a film, and not necessarily a ban or a block?
Yeah, I already talked about block and ban. See, when an issue has already died a natural death due to complete clearance from the law, why should he keep on making documentaries on dead topics? Because somebody wants to keep the fault lines alive.
Just a counter question. Why not, sir? Suppose let's assume an issue is settled, and if somebody wants to chronicle what happened and then it got settled in court.
I would rather say if such a courageous documentary maker has money like BBC has, then one would make a documentary on Delhi massacre, on Jabalpur massacre, on various riots in Gujarat, when for weeks Gujarat used to be under curfew. The young people don't know. And as far as freedom of expression is concerned, I would just remind one case in Kerala where SFI goons chased 3 baby young boys into the river, then kept them throwing stones till they drowned. So let us not talk of this kind of, great talk about freedom of expression. As far as NSA are concerned, again I'll ask the lady to go back to Congress history of freedom of expression. I am one of the people who went to jail for a long time during emergency to struggle against the emergency and restoration of democracy. So let us stick to the fact. Fact is that this is a dead issue. This is being kept alive, like the Supreme Court says, to keep the kettle boiling, and we should just close the matter, not keep on harping on issues which can create pain, which can result in a lot of unhappiness.
So now I understand. The objection is...
See, the documentary didn't start with 59 Ram Bhaks killed, burned to death in the bogie. Nobody talks of that. That is the problem. The starting point of the riots is not discussed. They have discussed the repercussions and later issues.
But how do you know, sir?
Want to start...
Unless, of course, you have seen the documentary, how would you know?
Okay, tell me. Has Godhra been discussed? Please tell me.
I don't know. I mean, as far as I am concerned, what I have been told, the Godhra train burning incident is mentioned in the documentary.
Yes.
Very
Maybe
prominently.
Like UC Banerjee said that people locked the bogie and burned themselves up. Have they interviewed the people who actually suffered on the both sides? Of 1,100 people died, 300 were Hindus. Of the people arrested, majority was Hindu. Cases which are run, everybody suffered with a jail term. Did such a thing happen in any other riots across India, including 1984? No, it didn't happen. So rather than appreciate that law and order was controlled,
that's the point that I am making. Mr. Ratan Sharda, do you feel
when he
that
wanted the police force?
Mr. Ratan Sharda, let me take this question to Zainab and then Mr. Pathania. Zainab, do you feel
On
the
Zainab,
answer to if there is a documentary which is allegedly, reportedly, supposedly bad, not factual, attempts to defame a country or an individual, should the answer be to block the documentary or hit back with another documentary? We'll watch another one. Then people can judge which documentary is correct or which interpretation is correct.
Absolutely. The answer is actually more than another documentary. The answer is the Supreme Court verdict, which clearly exonerated, Narendra Modi from the Gujarat riots. And I would also like to mention one more thing. Right now, Ratan Sharda ji said that, these kind of documentaries are raking up feelings, which, further, polarize the situation in India or anything else. But do you remember on the 75th Amrit Mahotsav, 12 rapists were also let go, and they were rapists in the Gujarat riots. They had raped Bilkis Bano. So doesn't that also do the same thing? So we can't cherry pick what makes the atmosphere, more polarized or not. Because this is cherry picking, because then the government of India has also again gone back to Gujarat and exonerated 12 rapists who were convicted of raping Bilkis Bano and murdering
Wrong
so
term.
many others. So
Wrong words.
So sir, how is it wrong words? Because this is
They were not
actually cherry
exonerated.
picking.
Zainab,
No, they were not
please.
exonerated,
I don't
sir.
interfere in any debate.
No, sir,
I
they
don't
were not
interrupt people. They
exonerated.
were not exonerated.
No, they were
Were
not. I'm
Rajiv
saying-
Gandhi's murders not released? No, were
Yes,
Rajiv
sir.
Gandhi's murders not released? Was there
But, sir,
exoneration?
No, sir,
Did
I'm
you
not saying
appreciate their
exonerated.
release? Gandhi family appreciated, Congress did. Remember this?
Sir, but you are saying that Gujarat
Once
riots
you
is a
behave in
matter
good
that should
manner,
not be discussed.
You are not
I also
glorified. You are not
agree
trying
with
to
you.
rake up the same issue. You are going
Sir,
against the decision that
Gandhi
people who are
family
served
was an
enough can be
assassination.
released,
Gandhi
including Rajiv
family-
Gandhi's murderers. So let
Sir,
us not
Gandhi
try
fa-
to compare the two.
Sir, Gandhi family
Your
was
words in
assassination.
themselves show
Gujarat
that
riots.
utter disregard and disrespect of the people who are not on a
No,
side.
sir.
You call them
Not at all,
right-wingers,
sir.
you call them thunderbolts, you call them whatever.
No, sir.
Is this
No,
the
no,
way
no.
to run a debate?
No,
You
sir.
come from an
I
elitist
am-
background, so you can abuse
No,
people.
sir. No,
with
sir.
Andhbhakt,
No,
the word
sir.
like
I also
Andhbhakt,
took
etc.
Tukde Tukde gang.
That is not
I
the
also
language.
took the-
Did I
Sir,
use any
I
disrespect?
also- Sir, I
Yeah,
also
yeah.
said Tukde
This
Tukde
was what
gang.
language
I
are
also
in-
said-
Should
I
we
did not.
move on? I know the
So
name
let
of the
us
show is
maintain
The
the
Big
dignity
Fight.
of the debate.
Sir,
But
I
we
also
fight,
said Tukde Tukde gang. I
decently.
also said Khan Market
Yeah.
gang. Sir, I took everyone's name. I didn't
Okay.
take only Andhbhakt name. So you have to see, I am basically
Okay.
showing both sides of the coin. I'm
Okay.
not showing one. And Gandhi family was an
let's
assassination.
quickly come back to the main
It was
question.
not a riot.
The
It was not a
blocking of a
riot.
documentary led to it becoming more popular, right? But now the question that I'm asking is that don't you think that the answer to supposedly a bad documentary is another documentary, another film? That will be a better way to hit back. Yes, Mr. Parvez Alam, I'll come back to you. Just one moment. Yes.
Sir, the BJP spokespersons here
course I agree on
have
that.
made it very clear that they are claiming that they haven't watched the documentary. But they're asking, has the documentary shown this side? Has the documentary shown that side? Yeah, we could have discussed all this freely had the government decided to not do anything.
Yeah.
Right. But instead, the BJP leaders have decided to fire blanks in the air. A documentary there that they have supposedly not seen. They are critiquing. They are critiquing. Right.
I like this
That they've not-
generous use of
Read
word
on that.
supposed, alleged.
They have not seen it. I'm sure our BJP leaders
All of us
respect
agree
the government's
except BJP
decision
that
to
there was
take
no
down the
need to
links
block.
and that they have not torrented it. I believe them.
Yeah.
They are law-abiding citizens of the country.
Yeah.
And they have not illegally downloaded and screened the movie, personally, most likely not. But they're critiquing it regardless, which is an interesting point,
Yeah.
right? Because just the mention of the past is enough. Right? A very paternalistic instinct that the party, the BJP has, that the government has, that past has happened, it's settled. Why wake up the people again with all this knowledge? It's a very paternal attitude towards the people, right? Right, we will tell the people what information you can know, what will further divide the people, etc., etc. Like people themselves can't decide. Like the people of India cannot watch the documentary and come to their conclusions.
Yeah.
The government will watch it for us. BJP leaders won't, of course, they abide the law. The government will watch it for us, and then they'll ban it for us, and they'll tell us the content is bad.
Yeah.
Please don't watch it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is not a banned documentary. This was only a directive issued by the central government to various online platforms to restrict the link. But right, in education...
No, but its screening is also being stopped in the universities.
That's being stopped, and we as students would like to watch a documentary. If BJP would, I don't think BJP or this current government will come up with a reply with a documentary. They'll come up with a fiction movie. And if they want that to be shown in educational institutions, I think as a student we are more interested in documentaries, more interested in authentic data or authentic way.
When you say fiction, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to, like, previously only a few days back ABVP showed a fiction movie. It's there, nobody interrupted, it's their choice, whatever they want to show. JNU has that democratic space.
Come on, say it.
If we,
Which movie?
I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't
was
be shy.
I am not shy. It was Kashmir Files shown by them, and it's a
So
win
Amisha
of the
of
students.
NSUI
It's the-
JNU is saying that a fictional depiction, these are her words, of what happened in Kashmir versus a real depiction of what happened
Documentary.
in this documentary cannot be compared. This is her view. Let me get your view.
The sheer insensitivity of this comment, Girija Tikku was raped, was gang raped, was Zinda Ari se unko nikalwa diya gaya tha, and you are saying that it is a fictional movie.
Will you quote
Sarala,
that in your research?
Sarala, but I will.
As an
I have
authentic-
written articles on
you
it.
will mention the authentic sources. Will you mention Kashmir Files as a source?
It is an
As in your
authentic source.
educational work.
Each and every
It's a-
incident, each and every survivor, victim that has been shown in Kashmir Files is backed by a real person in the history of Jammu Kashmir. So saying that Kashmir Files is a fiction,
There are incidents,
I am
but
demand.
you will quote an authentic source
from the side
here.
of ABVP.
I will not quote
I from
Kashmir
the-
Files. The movie
in
itself
Germany,
says
in
it's a
Germany,
fiction.
if you deny the Holocaust, you can be prosecuted, right? It is a crime. So I actually demand the Indian government through this platform that you should actually criminalize denying a genocide of the Hindus
I'm
in
not
Kashmir,
denying that.
because she
No,
said Kashmir
no,
Files.
no.
See, my friend, no one has denied it.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you remember, the screening went very peacefully.
Very
Was
peacefully.
Sarvanand,
Why?
Students
was
not even,
Sarvanand-
no one protested.
Was Sarvanand Kaul Premi a fictional character?
No.
Was
See,
Sarvanand
the
Kaul
screening
Premi
happened
everything-
without stone pelting.
Yeah.
screening
The
happened-
videographic evidence proves that leftist
That
goons
may
held
be
stones
true.
and sticks in their hand, and they were chasing down ABP
This is
students.
exactly what happened.
The mob-
exactly
the
like
mob-
We
2020.
Well,
respect
one by
the
one,
debate
please.
and
Yeah,
the
one by one.
discussion
It is quite
there.
sad.
We don't
This is
expect
exactly
It is
like
very sad.
January
It is very
5,
sad.
right,
Yeah.
It is not done.
where JNU
You are
President
denying-
Oishi.
Yeah, one by one. Arjun, one by one. Yeah.
This is exactly like leftists were holding screenings, and then leftists spelt stone against leftists doing screenings. Exactly like in January 5, when JNU President Oishi apparently hit herself in the head with an iron rod.
2 दिन में पट्टी
And-
खुल
Now
गई थी.
let's play
And,
the documentary.
and,
Yes,
Today's
we
her
should
in-
play
very
the-
good.
Let's play
Yeah.
the documentary here.
Very good immunity.
And
Very
then
good
we
immunity.
can
which
have
sad-
a discussion.
Here,
What
here
kind
is
of
the
sad
thing.
Genocide
You see,
deniers, genocide deniers are talking about freedom of expression.
No one denied
This
it.
is
let me
Very
quickly
sad,
come
very
back
sad.
to
Amisha ji
the
denied
topic
it.
of discussion
Very sad.
because I think we have drifted. That's the thing with this argumentative students from JNU, you know.
no, but one point.
Such
Then
a
they
huge
I
problem
never
with this,
denied.
huh?
That's a wrong.
See, they say
That's why you're called all
they are
sorts
quite-
of names.
They are quite
No.
they are quite perplexed that why the people of the country don't take them seriously.
Okay,
and
sure.
then they question
Sure.
EVM.
One more.
But
Mr.
they talk.
Yeah, Mr.
Our
Parvez
JNU
Alam wanted to
students
come. He's been waiting for a...
anti-national, just
No,
One more. Mr. Parvez
majority
Alam
of the
has been
students of
waiting for a
JNU
long
has nothing
time.
to do with these dirty politics of leftists.
Arjun, one more.
They are not even elected
Yes,
representatives.
Mr. Parvez Alam.
When you hold
Your
elections,
views
no.
now.
Yeah.
I will not.
If you
The
say-
administration will.
Look, quickly, I'll
Your
say just
administration.
something very basic in nature.
Yeah.
As I said that I joined, in 1988. Anyway, during all 90s, I was presenting and producing programs of news and current affairs in Hindi and for a brief time in Urdu as well. And then for some time, I was the executive producer of some of, the programs which were shown on BBC World Television, for example, Question Time India, etc., Hard Talk India. Karan Thapar used to be a presenter. Now, what I have observed during all this time, whenever, the Congress was in government and they were running the whole show, Bharatiya Janata Party walas and before that Jansang, they were quite okay with the BBC. In fact, lots of them will come to us, will tell us on record, and I'm saying it on record that I have interviewed Lal Krishna Advani ji on a number of occasions and very long interviews, half an hour, 1 hour long interviews. And then he had all, everything, appreciation for the BBC for covering the emergency period and during the Operation Blue Star, and also, during all those crisis situations. So everybody was listening to the BBC because the state broadcaster somehow was not doing its job, because the state broadcaster poor, because I used to work with All India Radio, so I know it was so restrained. I'll give you just a very, very quick example. In 1984, 31st of October, I was with All India Radio, posted at the Delhi station, and I was in the program officers meeting. The door opened on the 31st, and a senior program officer entered. She said that Mr. Gandhi has been shot. Now, we knew about this at 10. I knew about it, at 10. Now, poor Rajiv Gandhi, who was established somewhere in Calcutta, he was trying to tune into the BBC to know the correct picture of India, right? And then and it is known everywhere, his photograph of listening on a transistor, the BBC News, anyway. And he came back, but then the news was, given by the BBC for the first time to the rest of the world. Then Mrs. Gandhi, was in the hospital, and an attempt on her life was made. So this is just one example. Now, at All India Radio, I do remember that my, station director was so unhappy because we were playing a song called Lal Chhadi Maidan Khadi. When we knew about, Mr. Gandhi's this assassination attempt. Anyway, so immediately some of us went to the studio and said, well, let's play a violin and something very sad and tone. But anyway, for almost 6, 7, 8 hours, people of India had no idea about the current situation in that country. Now, it's the same thing would apply during the emergency period. So I'm saying it that when the BJP was in opposition, they
love the BBC.
All sorts of, they love the BBC. They would grant us long interview all the time. They would be available on the BBC. And Congress was all the time criticizing it. So I'm saying it that please try to understand this is also,
those in power don't like us.
Absolutely. You have a problem with the BBC because BBC is going to
sounds a little familiar.
Well.
This all sounds a little familiar, I would say. Thank you very much. I've run out of time. Thank you very much to all. It was a lovely conversation to know all sorts of aspects, the different views that people have on this documentary. But think about it. Think to yourself, is this the Streisand effect at play in this country because of this documentary? Good night and goodbye.